On a clear, crisp, and colorful winter's day in Dallas, Texas, one man is about to make a fateful decision that will change the world forever. It is the 22nd of November, 1963, 12:30 p.m. John F. Kennedy and his wife Jackie are traveling down Main Street in an open-top motorcade, surrounded by dedicated supporters. The car turns onto Daley Plaza and heads past the Texas School Book Depository. Within a matter of seconds, gunshots fill the air. President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally were hit. Seconds later, a third shot was fired, killing Kennedy instantly.
You, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of your ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
John Fitzgerald Kennedy became the President of the United States of America on the 20th of January, 1961, after winning the 1960s election against his Republican rival, Richard Nixon.
And I can assure all of you here who have reposed this confidence in me that I will be worthy of your trust. We will carry the fight to the people in the fall, and we shall win.
I want to say that one of the great features of America is that we have political contests, that they are very hard fought, as this one is hard fought, and once the decision is made, we unite behind the man who is elected.
Kennedy had always wanted a career in politics, thanks to his father, who he deemed as his role model growing up. Joseph Kennedy, John's father, was a crucial politician during the Second World War, as he held the role of ambassador to England from 1938 to 1940.
I'm looking forward with great anticipation to my duties here and to renewing acquaintanceship with many old friends.
Joseph, during this time, helped England justify their declaration of war against Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany. John also attended these crucial speeches. After serving as a naval commander in World War II, John had become a decorated war hero. On top of that, he had also become an award-winning journalist and author. But after his involvement in England during the outbreak of war in 1939, it was clear to see that John's future was going to be within political office.
On January 23, 1953, along with other new arrivals to the Senate, John F. Kennedy was sworn in by Vice President Alben Barkley.
Harry Truman once said there are 14 or 15 million Americans who have the resources to have representatives in Washington to protect their interests. And that the interests of the great mass of the other people, 150 or 60 million, is the responsibility of the President of the United States, and I propose to fulfill it.
President Kennedy was unlike any other president America had seen before. His charisma and charm, on and off camera, as well as on stage, was clear to see by audiences everywhere.
I am proud of a program and of a country that has helped to arm and feed and clothe millions of people who live on the front lines of freedom. I am especially proud that this country has put forward for the 60s a vast cooperative effort to achieve economic growth and social progress throughout the Americas, the Alliance for Progress.
His speeches were truly monumental and still hold up as iconic today.
Ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
Kennedy's political style and demeanor developed into an iconic image during one of the most tense periods of the Cold War. His outspoken love for the West and the freedom of his country became an ongoing theme everywhere he went.
As a nation, we have little capacity for deception. We can convince friend and foe alike that we are in earnest about the defense of freedom only if we are in earnest. And I can assure the world that we are.
But Kennedy was also looking to push America into a new technological age. It was this focus that became his all-time passion. During a speech at the Rice Stadium in Houston, Texas in 1962, Kennedy inspired a sea of dedicated fans. His speech was regarding America's future in the space race, which had been ongoing since 1957, and helped boost support for their goal of being the first country in the world to reach the impossible and land the first man on the moon.
For we meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too. Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked. Thank you.
Thanks to Kennedy's passion and determination for this project, it helped inspire people all over America and the Western world to get behind NASA and become the first country to step foot on the moon. Without this inspiring speech, some would say that the moon landing that took place finally in 1969 would not have happened.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Trouble did hit Kennedy throughout his short years in power, however. Tension between America and the Soviet Union was at its all-time high during the early 1960s, especially with Nikita Khrushchev in power. During a Vienna summit in 1961, Kennedy found himself face-to-face with Khrushchev, trying to mend relations and find a solution to ending the Cold War. This summit was a failure for both the Soviet Union and America. Frustrated by the summit, Kennedy left feeling like he'd not been taken seriously by the Soviet Union, his opinion only enhanced by Khrushchev's comments regarding Kennedy, stating that he was weak and inexperienced. Furious at these comments, Kennedy attacked the communist way of life back in America and stated that he would do anything to see freedom prevail.
My friends, I close on a note of hope. We are not lulled by the momentary calm of the sea or the somewhat clearer skies above. We know the turbulence that lies below and the storms that are beyond the horizon this year. But now the winds of change appear to be blowing more strongly than ever in the world of communism, as well as our own. For 175 years, we have sailed with those winds at our back and with the tides of human freedom in our favor. We steer our ship with hope, as Thomas Jefferson said, leaving fear astern. Today, we still welcome those winds of change, and we have every reason to believe that our tide is running strong. With thanks to Almighty God for seeing us through a perilous passage, we ask His help anew in guiding the good ship Union.
Threatened by Kennedy's comments, Khrushchev started preparing for a nuclear war, sending in Soviet troops to East Berlin. Kennedy followed in suit and deployed troops and military officials to West Berlin. While this was happening, citizens of East Berlin were leaving for the West in droves. Khrushchev needed to take action fast, and as a result, went on to build the infamous Berlin Wall, separating the communist world from the capitalist world. But his focus on communism didn't stop there, and he wasn't going to let it get to him as a leader. His focus turned back to the east, but this time to South Vietnam, where USSR-endorsed nationalist forces were beginning to look threatening to the French colony and South Vietnam government.
You will recall that in my recent address to the United Nations General Assembly, I expressed concern of this government over the situation in Southeast Asia, particularly on the attacks on the people of South Vietnam. With this situation in mind, I've asked General Taylor, with the wholehearted endorsement of Secretary McNamara and General Lemonster, to go to Saigon this week to discuss with the President and American officials on the spot ways in which we can perhaps better assist the government of Vietnam in meeting this threat to its independence. General Taylor will be accompanied by a small staff from the various departments of government which are concerned.
Kennedy went on to send 500 Special Forces troops to Vietnam, along with military advisors, and by 1962, 11,000 military officials were on the shores of Vietnam to help settle the tension. Throughout his presidency, Kennedy continued to battle against Khrushchev, encouraging citizens all over the world to defect to the West. Thanks to his youth and his charisma, Kennedy became renowned for looking calm in front of danger. It seemed to look like nothing could get past him, even if it looked like everything was crumbling around him. Because of this cool demeanor, Kennedy was frequently praised for being the face of freedom and being a true leader for the citizens of America in what could have been one of the most terrifying periods in American history. But in reality, the threat of communism was terrifying Kennedy. Jackie Kennedy, during this period, said that John could not sleep at all, as the constant threat of communism and its involvement in world politics kept him up at night, filling him with dread. June 26, 1963, Berlin, just under 4 months before his assassination. President Kennedy, in an act to solidify the West's faith and fight against communism, takes to the stage again. In front of over 120,000 citizens of West Berlin, Kennedy went on to give one of the most famous speeches in the whole of the Cold War, and it's argued to be the most anti-communist speeches in the history of world politics. This speech displayed America's solidarity to West Germany and gave the free world a big boost of morale.
Freedom has many difficulties, and democracy is not perfect. But we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in, to prevent them from leaving us. There are some who say that communism is the wave of the future. Let them come to Berlin. And there are even a few who say that it's true that communism is an evil system, but it permits us to make economic progress. Lass sie nach Berlin in kommen. Let them come to Berlin. 2,000 years ago, the proudest boast was Civis Romanus sum. Today, in the world of freedom, the proudest boast is Ich bin ein Berliner.
By the end of 1963, President Kennedy was the most idolized figure in America and the rest of the Western world. He had won the war of words against the Soviet Union's leader, Nikita Khrushchev, and was looking to push America into a more peaceful stage of the Cold War, all thanks to his incredible stage presence and charisma.
I want to express my thanks to you for this award. Politics is an astonishing profession. Permitted me to go from being an obscure lieutenant serving under General MacArthur to commander-in-chief in 14 years without any technical competence whatsoever. And it's also enabled me to go from being an obscure member of the junior varsity at Harvard to being an honorary member of the Football Hall of Fame. I urge the nation's community recreation centers to provide more opportunity for those who are no longer attending school. And finally, I urge organizations such as this, with all of the prestige and influence which you bring to American life, to help establish more programs for participation by American boys and girls, by Americans young and old. In short, what we must do is literally change the physical habits of millions of Americans, and that is far more difficult than changing their tastes, their fashions, or even their politics.
As long as the United States is the great and chief guardian of freedom, all the way in a great half circle from the Brandenburg Gate to Vietnam, as long as we fulfill our functions at a time of climax in the struggle for freedom, then I believe it is the business of the President of the United States to concern himself with the general welfare and the public interest. And if the people feel that it is not, then they should secure the services of a new President of the United States.
But just 3 months after the speech in Berlin, Kennedy's life was going to come to a shocking end. November 21st, 1963, 10:50 a.m. President Kennedy, along with his wife Jackie, depart the White House and fly to San Antonio, Texas on Air Force One. The married couple had begun their 3-day speaking and fundraising tour. Kennedy continued to promote his ideas of peace, as well as his love and admiration for the space program.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
His passion on stage and his love for his supporters was clear to see throughout Fort Worth, Austin, and Houston, Texas. Crowds were thrilled by the Kennedys' presence. 11 p.m. The weather had taken a turn for the worst. It had become a cold winter's night over the whole of Texas. With plans to go to Dallas in the morning to continue their tour, it looked like things needed to be changed last minute. 10:30 a.m., 22nd of November, 1963. Miraculously, during the night, the rain had unexpectedly stopped. The Kennedys left their hotel room in Fort Worth, Texas. The sun was shining. There wasn't a cloud to be seen anywhere. And it looked to be the most idyllic days, filled with color and life. 11:30 a.m. The Kennedys arrive in Dallas, Texas. They land at Love Field, and seconds after leaving Air Force One, they're greeted by hundreds of supporters and the press. 11:45 a.m. Kennedy meets up with Texas Governor John Connally and get in their open-top motorcade. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson in the car behind, with Kennedy's Secret Service following them. 12 p.m. The motorcade travels into downtown Dallas. The streets are filled with people. An estimate of over 150,000 have gathered to see a glimpse of their political hero. The streets are decorated with banners and confetti. Dallas now resembles a painting with its vibrancy of color. 12:29 p.m. Kennedy's motorcade turns off of Main Street and onto Daley Plaza. During this moment, Governor John Connally turns to Kennedy and remarks, "Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you." 12:30. While passing by the Texas School Book Depository, Kennedy is seen waving at audiences. Suddenly, the sound of 2 gunshots pierced through the air. The first bullet misses the motorcade, injuring a supporter on the side of the road. The second shot hits President Kennedy, passing through his neck into Governor Connally's hand and lodging itself in his leg. Injured and terrified, Kennedy slumps down onto his wife's shoulder. Jackie Kennedy goes to see where the wound is. Moments later, another shot hits Kennedy. This shot hits him directly in the head, killing him instantly.
Something has happened in the motorcade route. Stand by, please.
12:31. The motorcade speeds off from the scene and heads straight to the nearest hospital. Jackie Kennedy is seen reaching over the back of the car as she tries to somehow save her love of her life. Crowds surrounding the area scream in panic and take cover from wherever the gunman was shooting from. 1 p.m. President Kennedy's motorcade arrives at the hospital. Doctors grab his body and try to desperately save him. Doctors on the scene stated that Kennedy was in a devastating condition, and it looked like there wasn't much hope in saving him. 1:30 p.m. While the whole of America and the world was waiting on the latest news of their president, CBS News anchor Walter Cronkite broke the silence and confirmed President Kennedy's death.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
America was devastated as the breaking news rang out.
He was coming down the street, and my 5-year-old boy and myself were by ourselves on the grass there on Palmer Street, and I asked Joe to wave to him, and Joe waved, and I waved, and the man... That's all right, sir. You were as he was waving back, the shot rang out, and he slumped down in the seat, and his wife reached up toward him, and as he was slumping down, and the second shot went off, and it just knocked him down.
Investigations started immediately after the shooting had taken place. Texas police raided the buildings all over Daley Plaza. Eventually, at 1:20 p.m., police found a rifle on the 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Depository. But who could have possibly killed one of the most idolized figures the world had ever seen? What American citizen could go against his country and commit such a treasonous act? Could this have been an attempt by the Soviet Union to silence the most powerful leader in the world? 1:45 p.m. 15 officers raid a movie theater in Dallas. During this raid, one man is brought out. 1:50 p.m. Police arrest the man responsible for President Kennedy's death. That man was Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald was now public enemy number one. His actions had devastated citizens around the world and brought about a wave of uncertainty.
This is a sad time for all people. We have suffered a loss that cannot be weighed. For me, it is a deep personal tragedy. I know that the world shares the sorrow that Mrs. Kennedy and her family bears. I will do my best. That is all I can do. I ask for your help and God's.
But who was he, and what could have caused an American citizen to kill his own president? Oswald was born in New Orleans, Louisiana on the 18th of October, 1939. His family were proud patriots. His father, Lee Oswald, served in the Marine Corps during World War I, but unfortunately died before Lee Harvey Oswald was born. The Oswald family didn't settle anywhere during his childhood. They moved about frequently, settling in cities such as Dallas and Fort Worth in Texas, as well as the Bronx in New York. Being constantly on the move was part of Oswald's life. It's all he knew, and continued to move around later in his adult years. By just the age of 15, Oswald claimed that he'd been influenced by the Marxist ideology. While at school, he frequently read socialist literature, which helped him form his outlook on life. Oswald became obsessed by the Marxist ways and even wrote frequent letters to the American Socialist Party. His closest school friend, Edward Vogel, however, refused to believe these facts and said Oswald commonly read paperback trash. not socialist literature. Despite surrounding himself with communist manifestos and Marxist literature, Oswald joined the Marine Corps on the 24th of October, 1956, just before his 17th birthday. Oswald was underage, but thanks to his brother becoming his legal guardian, he was able to join. Oswald was heavily trained as a rifleman. In December 1956, while being tested on his shooting ability, Oswald scored 212, beating the Marine Corps average, labeling him as a sharpshooter. Oswald knew how to use a rifle. So was it any surprise to find that he was behind the shooting of Kennedy on that November day in 1963? After being given an honorable discharge from the Marine Corps in September 1959, Oswald was desperate to learn Russian and move to the Soviet Union. The literature he'd read made him idolize their way of life, and he wanted to make it his own. Within a month, he had renounced his U.S. citizenship and was determined to make a life for himself within the Soviet Union. In his application to renounce his citizenship to the U.S. Embassy, Oswald stated that as a radar operator in the Marine Corps, he knew things of special interest that he could tell to the Soviet Union. Because of this statement, Oswald made the news within America and went from being an honorable military reserve discharge to an undesirable, a section given to soldiers who were seen as mentally unfit for service. Oswald had already become a threat to the West at just the age of 20 years old and was regarded as a traitor to his country. In 1961, Kennedy had officially become president, but during this period, tension was rising between the Soviet Union and the United States, most notably within Fidel Castro's Cuba. Castro was believed to be accepting aid from the Soviet Union, an act that was terrifying for Kennedy, especially with Cuba being the closest Soviet state to mainland America. In an attempt to settle things, Kennedy ordered a group of highly experienced soldiers, Brigade 2506, a group of CIA-sponsored Cuban exiles, to invade the island and take Fidel Castro out of power. The operation was called the Bay of Pigs. The mission, however, was a horrific failure for Kennedy and America, and highlighted America's threat to Fidel Castro, who encouraged his citizens to stand against American involvement in their country. Kennedy withdrew all forces from Cuba and tried to repair the damages caused by the invasion.
So that I think that makes it clear. As I've said from the beginning, the operation was a failure, and that the responsibility rests with the White House.
Oswald, while traveling through the Soviet Union, noticed America's involvement within Cuba and stated his distaste for their actions. Oswald felt like Cuba were their own country, and if they wanted to embrace the communist ways of the Soviet Union, then that was their choice to make, not America's. But despite his hatred for American politics and involvement in international current affairs, Oswald was getting tired of the lifestyle within the Soviet Union. In a statement, he said there was nothing to do and the money wasn't as good as the money he had made from the Marine Corps. Oswald applied for his citizenship back to the U.S., despite holding his strong communist views and his admiration for the Soviet Union. Around this time, he met his soon-to-be wife Marina Prosakova, a 19-year-old pharmacology student. Oswald, Marina, and their newly born infant daughter eventually moved back to the United States in 1962 and settled in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a few miles out from where the fatal killing of Kennedy would take place a year from now. Oswald was surprised by how little media attention there was once he came back to America. March 1963. While browsing a mail order pamphlet, Oswald, under the alias A. Heidel, purchased a second-hand 6.5 millimeter caliber Carcano rifle for $29.95. Along with this purchase, he also ordered a .38 Smith & Wesson Model 10 revolver. On the 10th of April 1963, Oswald had become aware of an anti-communist figure who was ex-commander for the 24th Division of the U.S. Army, based in West Germany. This commander was Edwin Walker. Oswald despised Walker and classed him and his organization as fascist. After the purchase of his recent rifle, Oswald traveled down to his house in Dallas and attempted to shoot him through a window from less than 100 feet away. The bullet missed Walker and shattered against the wall. Oswald made his getaway and avoided all witnesses. This attempt on Walker's life was found to be unsolvable, and Oswald had gotten away with attempting to assassinate an ex-military commander and American hero. In June 1963, America was once again entered in an extremely intense and dangerous period within the Cold War. The Soviet Union's involvement within Cuba had hit the news again, and military pictures had surfaced of nuclear bases being set up in the mainland. Kennedy issued a statement on the situation and also went on to warn the Soviet Union about their nuclear presence and quarantined the island.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. Only last Thursday, as evidence of this rapid offensive buildup was already in my hand, to halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated.
Tension was at its highest it had ever been. One slight political mistake, and the world would have seen complete nuclear destruction. Kennedy, during this time, kept his cool demeanor and his promise to keep the public informed with the situation within Cuba.
The events and decisions of the next 10 months may well decide the fate of man for the next 10,000 years. There will be no avoiding these events. There will be no appeal from these decisions, and we in this hall shall be remembered either as part of the generation that turned this planet into a flaming funeral pyre, or the generation that met its vow to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war.
Eventually, on the 26th of June, 1963, the quarantine had ended, and the Soviet Union dismantled their nuclear missile bases. America still kept a close eye on Cuba, especially their leader Fidel Castro, who passionately hated the U.S. government.
I want to take this opportunity to report on the conclusions which this government has reached on the basis of yesterday's aerial photographs, namely that the Soviet missile bases in Cuba are being dismantled, their missiles and related equipment are being crated, and the fixed installations at these sites are being destroyed. The United States intends to follow closely the completion of this work through a variety of means, including aerial surveillance, until such time as an equally satisfactory international means of verification is effective. The continuation of these measures in air and sea is in keeping with our pledge to secure their withdrawal or elimination from this hemisphere, and it is in keeping with the exchange of letters with Chairman Khrushchev of October 27th and 28th. We will continue to keep the American people informed on this vital matter.
Back in Dallas, Oswald was disgusted by America's involvement and obsession with Cuba, once again going on to state that he felt Cuba should be their own country, and labeled himself as pro-Castro. In an act to try and get the American public to support Cuba and Fidel Castro, Oswald joined the activist group Fair Play for Cuba Committee. In August 1963, Oswald ordered 500 application forms, 300 membership cards, and 1,000 leaflets with the heading, "Hand Off Cuba." His wife Marina, however, told him to sign them under the name A.J. Heidel to hide his true identity from the U.S. government. In an extremely rare piece of footage, Oswald was seen handing out these flyers to passers-by. It's the one and only piece of footage of Oswald before the day of President Kennedy's assassination a few months later. Oswald, however, was later arrested for disturbing the peace on the 9th of August, as he handed out flyers in front of an independent anti-Castro organization. Here he got into a fight with the group's leader and the Cuban exile leader Carlos Brongnier, who state that Oswald was trying to gain information from the group. Oswald was fined $10 and was sentenced to a few days in prison. September 26, 1963. Lee Harvey Oswald, still obsessed with the recent events that had taken place within Cuba, was determined to travel there to see the country on his way back to the Soviet Union. Life in America had once again become difficult for him, as he had become a target for American officials once again with his pro-communist ideas. While traveling to Cuba, Oswald was stopped in Mexico and refused admission to the island, with the Soviet embassy believing he was a CIA agent looking to gather intelligence within the country. Oswald pleaded with the Soviet embassy, speaking terrible, hardly recognizable Russian. His application was refused, with the Cuban consular office stating that approving his visa would do more harm to the Cuban Revolution. According to the Warren Commission, after John F. Kennedy's assassination, Oswald's trip to Cuba was a plan to get easy access to get to the safety of the Soviet Union the day after he assassinated the president. October 2nd, 1963. Oswald returns to Dallas and moves into his new house with his wife Marina and his 2 daughters. Ruth Payne, Oswald's neighbor, had recently discovered that there was a job opening down in Dallas that Oswald could apply for. That job was in the Texas School Book Depository. Oswald applied for the job and got accepted in it the same day. But around this time, FBI agents were on his tail and were keen on speaking to the well-traveled ex-Soviet citizen. 2 weeks before the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Special Agent James P. Hosty sent FBI agents to go and speak to Oswald in his residency. They visited a few times, but every time found Oswald was not in. Oswald was furious with their obsession with him and traveled down to their headquarters requesting to meet Special Agent Hosty. Hosty wasn't there, but Oswald went on, leaving a threatening message to him which read, "Let this be a warning. I will blow up the FBI and the Dallas Police Department if you don't stop bothering my wife." Oswald was now a target, but one the FBI had to be extremely careful with. November 21st, 1963. Oswald, in a change of events, asked his fellow co-worker and neighbor, Wesley Frazier, for a midweek lift to Irving, Texas, stating he had to collect some curtain rods for his house. Frazier agreed without question. November 22nd, 1963. Early morning. Oswald and Frazier returned to Dallas. Oswald stopped at his home before leaving for work at the Texas School Book Depository at 7:30 a.m. Before leaving home, he left behind $170 and his wedding ring with Maria, but left the house carrying a large paper bag as well as the bag supposedly containing the curtain rods, which Fraser reported as odd in the Warren report. 11:55 a.m. Texas School Book Depository. Oswald's co-worker Charles Givens stated that he witnessed Oswald at work on the 6th floor of the building, 35 minutes before Kennedy's motorcade entered Daley Plaza. 12 p.m. Janitor Eddie Piper speaks to Oswald on the 1st floor of the building after he had just made a phone call 10 minutes prior. After this talk, Oswald wasn't seen again until after the fatal shooting. 12:10 p.m. Ray Williams, another co-worker, stated he was eating lunch on the 6th floor, believing to be the only one on that floor. Williams did state that there were a lot of boxes obscuring the window that was believed to be the sniper's nest, preventing him from seeing anyone in that room. 12:30 p.m. President Kennedy's motorcade passes through Daley Plaza and past the Texas School Book Depository. Deep in the sniper's nest, Oswald fires 3 bullets. The third one hit Kennedy in the head, delivering the fatal blow. Across the road, a witness of the shooting, Howard Brennan, claims he saw and heard a shot from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, confirming where the assassin was firing from. 12:32 p.m. Oswald is confronted in the cafeteria by Patrolman Marion Baker. Oswald's superintendent, however, vouches for his whereabouts during the assassination, saying he was working on a different floor. Seconds after this confrontation, Oswald leaves the building in a hurry and gets into a cab at the bus depot. 1:15 p.m. Traveling a few blocks away from the scene of the murder, Oswald, while walking down the street towards his house, gets pulled over by veteran officer J.D. Tippett. Tippett believes Oswald fits the description of the man seen fleeing from the scene. In a quick act of panic, Oswald pulls out a pistol and fires 3 bullets into Tippett, killing him then and there. 1:20 p.m. After raiding all the buildings near the scene of the assassination, officers find the recently fired rifle and 3 bullet cases lying on the floor nearby. The rifle was quickly identified as a 6.5 millimeter caliber Carcano rifle owned by A. Heidel, also known as Lee Harvey Oswald. 1:30 p.m. Sirens blare out all across Dallas, Texas. Hearing the sirens, Oswald ducks into a theater without paying and waits until the coast is all clear. Police were now looking for a man who not only murdered the President of the United States, but also J.D. Tippett. Both descriptions fit Oswald perfectly. 1:45 p.m. After the recent announcement of Kennedy's death by Walter Cronkite on CBS, police were determined to find the assassin. After being tipped off about a suspicious individual by locals, 15 police officers surrounded the local theater. 4 men were sent in to subdue the individual, and by 1:50 p.m., Oswald was captured and taken into custody. While in police custody, Oswald denied his involvement and continued to plead innocent to the charges of President Kennedy and J.D. Tippett's deaths.
Here comes Oswald down the hall again.
Did you fire that rifle?
That's as much as you people have been given, but I emphatically deny these charges.
You killed the president?
No, I've not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet. The first thing I heard about it was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question.
You have been.
Nobody said what?
Sir?
You have been.
Nobody said what? Okay, man, I hear you back. Okay.
3 p.m. Oswald starts being interrogated by the police. They take a paraffin test to see if he'd fired a gun recently. The test comes back positive. Oswald gets charged with killing J.D. Tippit, but was not accused of murdering the president yet. Saturday, November 23rd, 1963, 1:35 a.m. After being interrogated 3 times, Oswald finally gets charged with the murder of President Kennedy by Judge David Johnson, stating Oswald voluntarily and with malice of forethought killed John F. Kennedy by shooting him with a gun. While being escorted from the station on live television, Oswald was shot dead in front of the whole world by Jack Ruby, a patriotic citizen and Texas nightclub owner.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
Oswald was dead at the hands of a regular American citizen. The world had been stripped of the truth behind the assassination, and all details of what fully happened laid dead with Lee Harvey Oswald. Jack Ruby was arrested for the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald and sentenced to life in prison, despite being praised by citizens for getting revenge on the man who murdered the beloved president.
It was on an extremely hot afternoon last June that a young, vigorous, intelligent, dedicated president stood before the nation and said in eloquent terms that the issue which we face in civil rights is not merely a political issue, it is at bottom a moral issue. He went on to say that it is as old as the scriptures and as modern as the Constitution. It is a question of whether we will treat our Negro brothers as we ourselves would like to be treated. Since that hot afternoon last June, our nation has known a dark day and a dreary night. That same president was cut down by an assassin's bullet on Elm Street in Dallas, Texas. And I think the passage of the Civil Rights Bill is a lasting tribute to the memory of the late John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
I know that it was a source of the greatest strength to him to know that there were thousands of people all over the United States who were together with him, dedicated to certain principles and to certain ideals. No matter what talent an individual possesses, no matter what energy he might have, no matter how much integrity and honesty he might have, if he is by himself and particularly a political figure, he can accomplish very little. But if he's sustained, as President Kennedy was, by the Democratic Party, all over the United States, dedicated to the same things that he was attempting to accomplish, you can accomplish a great deal. No one knew that really for President John F. Kennedy.
This country, as it normally does, when it faces a crisis, it raises up, pulls itself up to meet the challenge. I don't suppose there was an American, regardless of their opinions of the late president, that didn't admire him in many respects. To me, he was a great man, and there was shock then, but as always, life must go on, and I think the new president has stepped in, and, well, I don't have to say that. The recent election shows that people are pleased, at least a great majority of them, with the conduct of the affairs of this country. Of course, there'll always be an emptiness when you think of the third Friday in November last year.
On September 24th, 1964, an 888-page report was presented to the new president, Lyndon B. Johnson. The document confirmed that President Kennedy was shot twice, with the second shot being the fatal killing blow. The report went on to document Oswald's past, his obsession with communism, and his love for the Soviet state. By the end of the report, it was confirmed that Lee Harvey Oswald was the true assassin of President John F. Kennedy. This simple man found Kennedy a threat to his ideology, and after being a trained sharpshooter in the military, it was clear to see that Oswald was capable of being able to pull off this shot and kill the president as he traveled in his motorcade. Despite America being stripped of their true justice system thanks to Jack Ruby and his fatal gunshot to Oswald, witness reports, along with Oswald's history and minute-by-minute movements leading up to that day, heavily suggests that he was the one that pulled that Carcano rifle trigger on that clear, crisp, and colorful winter's day in Dallas, Texas, 1963. An event that changed the world forever.